There's a famous story that when Sigmund Freud came to this country, early part of the 20th century, apparently, allegedly, some reporters came up and said, "Dr. Freud, what do you hope to do with your time here in the United States?" And he said, "Well, ultimately, I want to be able to determine the difference between true psychiatric illness and ordinary misery. Ordinary misery is good. How do we treat most psychiatric illness today? Exposure. Exposure therapy has been shown to be one of the most significant advances in psychiatric care. Not a safe space, not avoiding things you find unpleasant, exposure to things. That's how you develop resiliency and strength and regulatory capacities in the face of difficulties. Exposure. Ordinary misery is good. You work it through. And exposure is how you build mental health. We have done the freaking opposite for the last 30 years. We've created a population that is not healthy mentally. I'm sorry. And at very minimum, you should be worrying about meaning making and contributing more than we do, not getting or experiencing. We should be making meaning. That's of our lives. That's the most important. Humans are meaning making machines.
Growing up in Southern California, Dr. Drew was a mainstay on K-Rock radio, but he is just gone on to have an amazing career. You may know him as Dr. Drew Pinsky. I'm so pleased to have him with us today. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about Maha, Bobby Kennedy, the measles, bird flu, safe spaces, transgenderism. We cover the gamut, and he is so fascinating. The guy knows a lot. He's a board certified internist. He's an addiction specialist. You'll find him in a million places, and he's always worth listening to. Dr. Drew Pinsky is next. Please hit the subscribe button. Please, won't you do that so you never miss interviews like this? Just whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, wherever, just click that subscribe button so it's always showing up for you. Doesn't cost you a thing. We hope you'll join us. Dr. Drew is our guest next. It's always a good time to have Dr. Drew on the show. How are you, Drew?
Always a good time, Michelle. Good times. So here we are.
Well, it's interesting. If you're viewing the world in one particular way, you think it's the scariest time to be alive in all of humanity.
Yeah.
And from another point of view, you think it's an exciting time and possibly a very good time. Where do you fall, Dr. Drew?
It's so funny that you say that because I spent a bit of time thinking about that. I think, about the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. I've thought about that over the years, and I had thought I lived in interesting times at various times in my life, but nothing more interesting than the present moment. And now I've begun to think, that it's a curse, because interesting times are always dangerous times, uncertain times, challenging times. And my goodness, that is certainly the note for the day.
What do you see as, like, when you wake up in the morning and you look at the world, is there a top three, the biggest challenges for you? Well, we're talking about health, and something that can help with your mental health, your physical health is Kimchi One. Kimchi One from Bright Core Nutrition. So Kimchi One, what is it? It packs all the fermented nutrition of kimchi into convenient capsules, arming your gut with over 900 unique strains of probiotics, supporting gut flora and digestion. I've been taking it for weeks now. I highly recommend it because all health starts in the gut. So putting the right fermented superfood in your gut improves every aspect of your health, your skin, your hair, your mental performance, even maybe it helps promote a smaller waistline. That is not fat shaming. This helps with obesity. Obesity is a health risk. Kimchi One is all natural, made in the USA, non-GMO. And today you can get an exclusive offer just for my listeners and viewers, 25% off with the code Michele. Remember, I spell it with one L, Michele, by going to mybrightcore.com/ Michele, mybrightcore.com. You can find it in the show notes. Even try this. Call my friends at Brightcore. You can get up to 50% off and free shipping on your order. Give them a call. Here's the number, 888-927-5980. Here it is again, 888-927-5980. They have an educated staff who will make sure that Kimchi One is right for you. 888-927-5980 or mybrightcore.com/MICHELE. What do you see as, like, when you wake up in the morning and you look at the world, is there a top three, the biggest challenges for you?
Gosh, I don't think it's like that for me. That like, oh, I got to check these 1, 2, 3 things every day off my
Right.
list. Or I think the biggest challenge, frankly, is I have become an enthusiast for Voltaire, particularly in this. This will all make sense eventually. Particularly,
I love this.
how he ends Candide. So Candide does this world tour, looks at all this horrible human suffering, and he is with Dr. Pangloss, I think is his name, who is constantly saying, it's the best of all possible world. Isn't this glorious what God has created? And Candide is sort of like, and they're sort of like, maybe. And at the end, he sees all these horrible things. He goes back home, and one of the characters asks him, what have you learned? What have you decided after all your world's travel? And he said, well, il faut cultiver nos jardins. You must just cultivate your own garden. And that is, I could not be a more profound statement for the present moment, which is make sure your ethical, spiritual alignment is good, or emotional landscape, ideally. Take care of your family, tend your own business. Don't let all of this craziness we're talking about undermine that important focus on our own gardens.
It's amazing, the word garden in that phrase, because there are days when I am so hyper focused on the outside world. And then I think to myself, wouldn't it be just so nice if I could go home right now and start weeding the garden and taking care of my own yard and just focus on that?
Well, and
that would be enough.
And I would argue you should have a daily practice like that. For me, it's sort of working out and listening to certain podcasts and things. But I do advocate that. It's not just a metaphor. There's a literal component to it. It doesn't have to be gardening, but there needs to be a daily practice, I think. And because we're you got to sort of be flexible enough and strong enough to handle what's going on. And you certainly, it's much like, they tell you when you're getting ready to take off in an airplane, you got to put the mask on yourself before you can help anybody else. This is that similar kind of advice.
Yeah. My husband, who is in finance, will say, you can weather the storm if you're in the right vehicle. It's like, and when I first came to Minnesota from California, I thought, how in the hell do people live in this weather? And my husband said to me, it's not the weather's not bad if you have the right gear. And so, it's kind of that way.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know quite what my point's going to be here, but as someone but I'm thinking about my own experience in cold weather, and I lived through some horrific. I went to college in New England, and I was completely unprepared for it. I was a California beach kid, and nobody pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're going to need something called a scarf and a hat and gloves." And it took me until my senior freaking year to figure that out. But you're absolutely right. So the point is, I guess, you've got no one but yourself to rely on. So pay attention.
It's so well said. And it's tough for people to do. And I think the wisdom often comes very late in life for people. They've experienced a lot, and it takes them until they're in their 50s or 60s to go, this is why old people stop caring about Hollywood. This is why old people stop caring about other stuff. It's because they understand this. And so, you've worked with people of all ages. So for parents out there who are trying to cultivate this wisdom within their own and I'm not talking about 4-year-olds, but although it's probably never too early to start, but with their own kids, it's hard for parents to get the lessons through, isn't it? How about this email from Lorraine E? Nothing I've tried works better. This stuff's great. I fall asleep quickly, and even when I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, maybe too much information, I have no midnight anxiety and fall asleep again. Thank you for a terrific product. Don't change a thing. I couldn't agree more. I've been using Sleep Cream now and telling you about them for months. I love this stuff. It is always on my nightstand. I travel with it because sleep is an issue. And you may change time zones, all of that stuff. What is Sleep Cream? You don't need a prescription. You don't need it. It's not a drug. It's literally a cream that you apply at bedtime. And I was a skeptic. I heard about this product and I thought, really? They said, just give it a try. See what you think. So I did. And now I'm a full-blown endorser of Sleep Cream. Find them at sleepcream, CREME.com. They use all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. The stuff smells so good that it kind of adds this aromatherapy element to your relaxation. I put it on the insides of my forearms and elbows at bedtime, and within minutes, I am able to relax and do what my body needs, which is sleep. Find them at sleepcream.com, sleep, CREME.com. Try it for yourself. If it doesn't work, if you don't experience better sleep, they will refund your purchase guaranteed. You don't have to return anything. Sleepcream.com, sleep, CREME.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY at checkout for free standard shipping on your first order. That's the code GAMEDAY at checkout for free standard shipping on your first order. So if you're ready for your best sleep ever, go to sleepcreme.com. Use that code GAMEDAY. It's hard for parents to get the lessons through, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my goodness. I mean, I think I have a new grandchild too, and I've been thinking a lot about, how am I going to help my son deal with this and his wife. I think it's so hard. I'm doing a presentation, and I'm not, again, you ask these great questions and I'm never quite sure where I'm going with my answers.
That's
so let me
okay.
keep going.
We're here to meander.
I'm doing a presentation at the Manhattan Club on a couple of days with a guy named Rob Henderson, who is a Cambridge PhD social psychologist who wrote a book called Troubled that's coming out. And it's full of, it's a historical document. It's really what has happened to our families, what has happened to what happens to young people in economically distressed environments. And it's just a story of late 20th century childhood in distressed circumstances, which are common. And he then finds his way out through the military. He finds his way, because of the GI Bill, into Yale, gets a psychology degree, then goes to Cambridge and gets a PhD. And he is this incredible resource now, where he's the guy that developed the concept of luxury beliefs. You heard that concept?
Yes.
Yeah, that's him. Where he went
But
to Yale.
Explain
and
that for people who haven't heard.
Well, he went to Yale and he saw these kids telling him about his privilege and how he should feel and what his life is like. And he was like, you people have no idea, first of all, what you're talking about. And secondly, these are bad ideas for the people that I grew up with. They will suffer because of these ideas. But these are ideas that because you do have privilege, can have as a luxury, an ideology that you're disconnected from. And of course, things like, do you expect to stay married? Yes. Is marriage a goal for everybody? Oh no, it should be nobody's goal. Polyamory is a great thing, but for me, no. Monogamy, marriage. That's because they're reared in it. They understand it. They've had benefits from it, but they don't want to judge anybody else. Whatever. So the point is, Rob had this incredibly difficult childhood. He was in the foster care system. Just all kinds of stuff happened to him. And you've asked parenting, how to deal with parenting. I think some of the basics still apply, which is the sense that, lots of change. Instability is incredibly difficult for kids. Attachment and attunement to the child are essential to developing emotional flexibility. we've lost track of the importance of real education.
Oh,
I have such value of my undergraduate education because it kicked my brain into gear where I could read, write, and think. I mean, really
yeah,
think, penetrate, apply the
yeah.
scientific method in rigorous fashion. Now it's about towing the right line, or I don't know what they're teaching on campus anymore. I'm disturbed and worried
Well,
about it.
first you have to acknowledge that you're on campus on stolen land.
Right,
That's the first thing you must do.
right.
You must make that proclamation.
Yes, yes. You have to have, this is
Repent.
what one of the points that Broad makes in his book. You have to have proper thoughts. It's like, I just want you to have thoughts and be able
Yeah.
to be able to think. But I'm building to my point about parenting, which is this I'm holding up my phone, is the challenge of parenting today.
Yeah.
This is really where things are going off the rail all the time. And I don't have any simple solutions for that. I do applaud schools that are kicking the phone out of the school. I think absolutely that's a starting
Mhm.
point. I
Mhm.
also think that parent groups themselves ought to have sort of agreed upon standards.
Yeah.
So kids, at home may be restricted in terms of their access to problematic material, but then go to their screwball friends and he's like, "Hey, look at this!"
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to protect your kids against all of it if you can, and
Mhm.
acknowledge that we really don't know the full impact of all this. We
That's a little
don't. I mean, we
terrifying.
just don't know it yet, but it's
Yeah.
not going to be good. That's for sure. Now, by restricting social media and other things, yes, you are limiting their social functioning. We understand that. So there needs to be some sort of balance. I am not of the opinion they should have zero involvement. It should be limited and structured and
Yeah.
supervised to some extent.
I remember my son was part of this pack we called the Wolf Pack that ran around the neighborhood when he was little. There were about 7 of them. And we would say, okay, the moms all agreed. When they come into your house, you put out a basket and all the phones go in the basket. Now go play in the yard. Go do
Good,
something. Go
good.
without your
Dig
phones.
it.
Because otherwise, inevitably, Drew, they would all be sitting around like, the baseball field they had set up in the backyard, but
Yeah,
they'd be sitting going like
of
this.
course.
And you're kind of like, this is so. One
Although
of
it does sound like you were doing the Robbers Cave experiment right there in your neighborhood. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that experiment was?
no, no,
Oh my God, it's a great experience. It tells you so much about human beings. And you could never do it today. It was in the 50s. They took there was a camp on an island, and they took these middle class young boys. I think they were 8, 9 years old, and they just arbitrarily put them into 2 groups. And they had a lot in common. There wasn't anything really different about them. It was intentionally sort of selected that way. And they told them that they were a team and that they were a club, and they were to create a name for the team and a flag for the team. And of course, it was like the scorpions and the flag and the snakes and very quickly they started denigrating the other group. Like quickly they started talking crap about the other kids and what was wrong with them and then equally as quickly they started having conflicts. And so they tried to have like games and competitions, and violence broke out because they had so dehumanized each other. These are 9-year-olds that
wow.
and had so identified with the group and I mean, this is important data for today's world when people are in these echo chambers and these groups. I don't know what else to call them. This is in human nature, and it is the worst of human nature. And
Yeah.
this tribalism and the denigration of outside tribes and the inside and the outside and scapegoating. It's all developmentally evolutionary in us. We must be aware of it and fight against it and not lean into it the way we've been leaning into it in recent years.
Have we ever? Oh my goodness, have we ever? I mean, it's breaking up families,
Yeah.
and other things break up families too. So
Mm.
it's not as though your family is guaranteed to stick together simply because you're related by blood.
No,
But
I mean, look, James Carville and his wife, right? Do you
it's
know?
astonishing.
You're right. She's a hyper conservative. He's hyper liberal, and they've done great. And it's so funny. I know you probably don't know this, but they had a pilot for a talk show back in the '90s. The two of them. Isn't that funny? And I was one of the guests on the pilot, and I had the funniest damn experience with them. She's of course brilliant, and she was
Yeah.
interviewing me, and he was up in the audience with a microphone trying to get feedback from people in the audience and whatnot. And we were talking about differences between men and women, and I was just talking about motivational differences and what people see as different, or what's attractive versus not attractive for men versus women. And she goes, "Oh, wait a minute now." And he from the audience, God bless him, goes, "Of course there's differences." He goes, "Look at me." He goes, "Look at her. Look at her." He goes, "And now look at me. I'm ugly. I'm ugly. And I've been with this woman for 10 years." I thought, oh, I love you, James Carville. Fantastic.
I'm amazed that pilot didn't take off, because I thought the two of them together, and I never see her anymore. I see him a lot.
Is she okay?
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we should do a wellness check. But it's interesting. Speaking of the differences between men and women, because that seems to be a very big thing, a topic these days. We heard Whoopi Goldberg on The View the other day, and I don't necessarily like quoting The View or highlighting The View. I had the opportunity to
just put it alongside of Voltaire there. Let's quote Voltaire and then The View. Of course, they go together.
They go together. I had the opportunity to appear on The View multiple times, and so and
by the way, Joy, I have nothing but peace and love for everybody there. I had lots of interesting conversations with Whoopi in the makeup chairs. I had Joy and I were on HLN together, and I don't like it when they get so acrimonious or negative. It feels beneath them, frankly. But maybe it's their job now.
I guess it's their job, but it's hard for me to not believe that they seem to believe everything that they're saying.
Seems to be.
And, look, do I have acrimony for them? I wasn't treated particularly well for the times that I was in the chair that they were considering me for the conservative chair, and considering me, I think, pretty strongly, because I was the producers came to me and so forth. But Dr. Drew, there's no way I could have taken that chair. And I let that be known, because when you go into the meetings in the morning, and all of you are sitting there talking about what's going to be on the show that day, it was very glum. It was very downbeat. It was, and it was at the time I was doing this during COVID, and my brother didn't want to get the shot. And I mentioned that in conversation, and boy, did Joy Behar have choice words for my brother, whom she doesn't know. So having said all of that, the other day on The View, Whoopi decided to say, while they had Dylan Mulvaney, maybe the most famous trans woman in the world, or besides Caitlyn Jenner, on the show, and they were saying, what? I don't understand what the problem is of boys competing against girls. It's not like these girls are all, oh, I'm so weak and I can't take it.
Yeah.
It's almost ignorant to suggest this.
I had a reaction to that, and I thought the point should be this, just a very simple point. Let's take two genetically identical monozygotic individuals, and let's give one puberty blockers before puberty, and let's give one hormones after puberty. Do you think there will be a difference in their athletic performance? One will have no influence of male hormones because they missed puberty. The other will have the full influence on bone density and muscle mass, but then was sort of diminished by the estrogens. Do you think there will be a difference in athletic performance and strength? Yes or no?
My gut says yes.
Of course, spectacular differences, massive differences. Even though the one is still XY, puberty is what really determines, really what adds on the massive difference in strength and performance that kicks in. It's just unavoidable. I mean, look at Leah Thomas, is that her name? She had hormones after puberty. And guess what? Are these people that are winning by 5 laps or, a mile ahead of everybody else? They didn't get puberty blockers. They didn't get, and Joy, I know, is in favor of puberty blockers. So how does she reconcile that? Should you say only participate in female sports if you've not gone through puberty? It's It's a position, but to
So
say
that's
that there's no difference is
right.
completely wrong.
Completely wrong. And there's a
Look who's
reason.
calling me. Cat Timp. She
Do you want to take a
never
moment and
ever
take her
calls.
call? Yeah.
Real quick, let me take that
Okay.
call.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll cut this.
I'm on Michele Tafoya's podcast. Okay, yeah, you never call. I said, Michele, it must be an emergency. Cat Timp is calling me. Okay. Yes, you should freak me out. In a few minutes, okay? All right, bye. Bye.
Everything okay?
Yes. She said the first thing I wanted to say was no one's dead because she knew that I would react like that.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Good.
Oh,
Good to know. No one in her circle is dead.
Yeah.
But this idea that Joy Behar is in favor of puberty blockers. Puberty is uncomfortable for everybody, particularly for girls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. But for everybody, it's a rough time. But the only way you get through it is to go through it. I don't, and I think we had a Democrat on Alyssa Slotkin, who gave the Democratic response to Donald Trump the other night, on The View also recently say, we just got to get our kids through, the teenage years alive and let their brains develop.
And what do you do when you have a teenager who's threatening themselves and others? You just try to get them through this period alive so that their brain can fully form and you can come back to.
Okay, that on the one hand, but if they say they were born in the wrong body before their brains developed, you want to give them puberty blockers or gender affirming care that is medicinal rather than talk therapy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I know where you come down on this, Drew.
Well, no, actually, I'm somewhat nuanced on this, in fact, because this is a diagnosis. It's in the DSM-5, and I've seen proper treatment rendered properly to the appropriate patient with excellent outcome.
What is the DSM-5?
That is the diagnostic manual for psychiatry.
Okay.
And so gender dysphoria is a real condition. I have a friend who she was from another country, and in that country, she developed this dysphoria during puberty. She was sent to her pediatrician. Her mother said, I think there's something going on here. The pediatrician said, yes, I think this needs psychiatric care. 4 months of psychiatric analysis. They went, yep, you have gender dysphoria. You will need to be on dangerous medicine the rest of your life. This is a very serious intervention. We are not going to do blockers. We are just going to do the hormones, but could affect you. And they go through all the dangerous side effects. And if you are deciding to have surgery, well, that's a much bigger decision you'll have to make in adulthood. And she has been terrific, wonderful. I can't imagine her any other way. And I have seen people get puberty blockers where the outcome was remarkably good, in my opinion. The problem is that is because the right treatment was given to the right patient. And we in medicine do not yet know how to identify that patient and exactly what treatment is necessary for a given circumstance. What they've taken instead is everybody gets everything just at their whim. There is nothing in medicine like that. Nothing ever works like that. You will only harm people. Look, I'm worried about the GLP-1s because they're sort of being used that way too. Everybody gets it. You're going to have adverse effects. People that shouldn't get it will get it and will be harmed. Same thing with these interventions. It's up to the medical community must determine the correct patient, the right treatment at the right time for the right duration. That is what we do. And we have abandoned that, I would say, completely when it comes to transgender care. And it's going to harm people. And now we have that one big study out that suggested that people that have the surgery are more likely to commit suicide, more likely to have depression. And that doesn't mean no one should get the surgery. That means the wrong people got the surgery, and that's on the surgeons. That's not on the patient. And that's on the people that are insisting that people get a certain kind of medical. That nobody should be involved in the medical management of anything anymore. Did we not learn that during COVID? It's always a catastrophe when somebody from on high is telling patients and doctors how to conduct themselves in their relationship. It's disgusting, and it's going to harm people. And I hope they take action for the ones that do get harmed.
Well, it seems that that's going to be the way that this sorts itself out. That people are going to come back with these lawsuits later on, but what you mentioned is really important because this is such an overarching sentiment among people. We got so effed during COVID, and we aren't trusting really anyone. So that even when I went to see a doctor that I trust and I've known and I like and all of that, and
Yeah.
he said to my daughter and me, "Are you going to get your COVID vaccine this year?" And I said, "Uh-uh." And he kind of looked at us like, and I said, "Not going to do it. I'm sorry. We did it the first year. We're not doing it anymore," because I know people who have had the adverse effects.
Of course.
I'm not, there have been adverse effects. I'll just live through the COVID because I'm pretty sure I'm healthy enough to withstand it.
Look, you have got, I can't believe doctors still do that. You've got to ask that doctor, what is the risk reward analysis here? What are we doing? What are we treating? What exactly? Because those vaccines are for variants that were with us 6 months ago.
Right.
And then what is my risk at my age? By the way, since we have Paxlovid and molnupiravir and all these other treatments, I'll take the Paxlovid if I get that sick. And I'll take the monoclonal antibodies if I get even sicker. Why are we pushing vaccine right now for a variant that isn't around? In fact, isn't even near me. And we have concerns about this vaccine. And have you read the Pfizer's own data? Have you read their studies and how they determine safety and efficacy and what the efficacy was? And now what is the risk for me exactly, specifically? And they can't answer that stuff because they've not done any of it. They're just doing the. We have to be careful in medicine. We become a little culty. We just do. I was thinking about that years ago. I thought, why? I was working with a renal patient. I thought, well, why am I giving him that? Oh, yeah, it's because that nephrologist I really respect that taught me to do that. It's like, but I didn't really think it through. We just did it as a matter of convention. There's a lot of that in medicine, a lot.
And so if you're a patient who's being told you need this medication by a doctor, what do you do to make sure?
I want informed consent. I want an informed consent document, and I want you to go over the risk reward with me in detail.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they kind of hand you forms and you're supposed to sign. Speaking of that, I know this has been on your radar is the measles. We've seen a few cases in Texas. We've seen at least one death. It seemed that this was never going to come back. It is back for multiple reasons. Yeah. What do you think is the big? Is it the refusal of some people to get vaccinated?
And we have bird flu too. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I am a measles vaccine fan. I think look, the biggest problem with measles is adults. Measles in adults is brutal. You should, if there's an outbreak in your region, if you live in South Central Texas or wherever this outbreak is, you might want to get your antibodies tested. And if you do not have adequate immunity, take the vaccine. The risk to adults seems almost zero. To children, again, talk to pediatricians. When do you time that? When do you time it relative to other vaccinations? I get it. These are hard decisions, but the doctor and the patient should be making those decisions on a regular basis together. I have a patient who can't take any vaccines, and she's older and she has multiple medical problems. And she asked me yesterday, what do I do? I said, well, first of all, why are you worrying about it? We have no measles here. We have none where she is. Don't travel to where there is. Maybe don't travel at all because the measles is highly contagious. I mean, you can a measles patient can walk down the aisle in the grocery store. 2 hours later, somebody can still get infected. It is a highly contagious.
Wow. Wow.
And measles encephalitis and measles pneumonia, they're brutal. People shouldn't be too casual about this.
But people who were vaccinated as kids, they're vaccinated, right?
Well,
they're
if
good.
You're at certain age groups, the vaccine is not effective. I had to be revaccinated. My immunity was zero because the early vaccines in our age group, my age group, not that great. And so I got revaccinated. Remember Leanne Tweeden, she and I had a radio show together, and we both had our levels tested, and we took the vaccine because there was I forget what was happening at the time. There was maybe a little outbreak or something, but of course you didn't hear about it because it wasn't. Why the press is reporting on this stuff now is so insane to me. It should not be your business. It should be me, CDC, other doctors. We should be worried about it. We'll let you know when the press needs to report on it. I don't want to hear another word of grim milestone or staggering data. Immediately, it's a psyop when you hear those kinds of words. Disgusting.
Wow, a psyop.
Well, of one sort or another. I don't know if it's coming from the usual sources, but the media does psyops to get your attention, it seems to me.
All right. So you're saying people in a certain age group might want to get their antibodies
Yeah.
tested and
Yeah.
find out. Would it be dangerous to skip the testing and just go straight to get the vaccination?
You can go do that.
Okay.
You can do that. That's a reasonable thing.
Okay.
But like I said, this woman that I'm worrying about, did she have measles when she was a kid? I don't know. I can't vaccinate her. We're gonna have to get a little more deeper into the
Right.
weeds with her and figure out what to do. But the point is, she and I will figure it out. We'll navigate it. We'll be okay. The world does not need to be involved in any way with that medical intervention, nor any other that I undertake. And by the way, because the press is so dumb, they miss the really serious stuff. Do you know that we had a indigenous mosquito transmission of dengue fever in Southern California, 2 of them? That is a huge deal medically and infectious disease standpoint. Dengue fever was a rarity up in, it came from Central and South America, well, not Central America primarily, and the Caribbean and the Gulf of America. And it would come up, we would see it once in a while, but it was always transmitted down there by the Anopheles mosquitoes that were down there. Well, those mosquitoes have migrated up and they have dengue and they have transmitted. That is going to be a major, 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 major issue. But no one's talking about that because they don't know enough to do so.
Wow. Okay. That's something. Okay, there we go, folks. Now you've been alerted. Watch out for that.
Alerted, wear your, your off or whatever mosquito repellent you wear. Mosquitoes carry all kinds of things, as do fleas. Yeah. We have a rat infestation in Southern California because of the homeless population, and we're not allowed to use rat poisons because Governor Newsom doesn't think that's a good idea. And so we have a massive outbreak of typhus, and we have some bubonic plague. We will have more. So just pay attention to the insects. They carry all kinds of real illness.
And pay attention to whom you're voting for.
Yeah, I mean, that's more importantly. Please. Yeah, so your house is burned down in the Palisades. That's not your fault either.
Yeah, and if he's spending all his time producing a podcast these days instead of actually getting to the issues, that might bother you as well. I'm no fan of Newsom.
No.
As you and I both grew up in California, in Southern California, and I lament what's gone on with that state. Yeah. Last thing for you. Yeah. Let's talk a little Maha. What do you think, just as RFK Jr. now is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
Well, I've been a fan of his. I didn't really declare him as my candidate for president, but I supported him, and I did events with him, and I moderated panels and stuff. I know him very, very well, and the fact that he is at HHS and Jay Bhattacharya is at NIH, to me, this is Shakespearean justice. This is poetic justice, and these are great minds. Kennedy is an expert at taking apart complex systems and looking at adulterating influences. Yes, please. I'd like him to do that. And he and I have talked about how he's going to do it, and he has got his eye on the real serious problems. And make no mistake, there is trouble. He will uncover it and he'll root it out, and that's fine. Jay Bhattacharya, brilliant man, great human being. He will be just and careful and appropriate in how he allocates NIH resources. Some people were sort of fishing around for me to come over to SAMHSA, and I said on one condition, that I could shut it down because it has done untoward harm. And you saw yesterday, cut the staff by 50%. I just found out a very dear friend of mine is going to be in the upper administrative structure there. I have hope for SAMHSA now, and that's all coming through the HHS. And I don't know if you also read the CDC director. It's not going to be who they thought it was. They're going to bring somebody else in. I'm curious to see who they bring in. I'm sure it'll be a good, it'll work well with Bobby Kennedy. We needed a shakeup badly, in particularly in HHS, and we got it. And we'll see. Hopefully, they can put it all back together in ways that are better.
There's a lot of shaking up going on. Earlier this week, we talked to Secretary Doug Collins, Secretary of the VA. We look at what's going on with the Department of Education. One of the best things that Secretary Collins said to me was, you would think that before I got there, the VA was perfect. Because any alteration that we make now is suddenly under the microscope, and it's bad.
Yep.
And it's like saying, looking at the nation's report card and saying, boy, schools are going great. Let's keep that Department of Education afloat and let's not change a thing. I mean, stuff needs to change. And this, I think this is the most interesting of interesting times. This fact that it seems like more people are really open to that. And I think proponents of that change, there are a lot of loud voices, Drew, that are saying, no, 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 no. But I think there are more voices that are saying, yeah.
Michelle, I think back to times when, we've lived through relatively static, I would dare say ossified times. And you think about, times when there was massive change, post McKinley, or even McKinley and Kennedy and Teddy Roosevelt, and then Wilson and what he did, and then FDR and the massive changes. And of course, there were huge voices against what those guys were doing at the time, but they were monumentally disruptive changes at the time. We sort of look at them now as like, oh, well, that's just what they did, and look at it. We don't really think about what it would be like to live through those changes in those times, and they were huge. And now we need to do it again. We need to go through another sort of cycle of change and rebuilding and doing this better.
Well, there's a lot we can do better. And I could spend so much more time with you. You know what? Let me ask you one more here,
go ahead.
because you hinted to this. I saw you in New York and we were chatting about overprescribing and underprescribing.
Oh, yeah.
In a nutshell, what is that issue? What does it mean to under and overprescribe? Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump. What does it mean to under and overprescribe?
We do this strange thing in this country. We both at once overprescribe and underprescribe. So people that really need treatment tend not to get it. And people that shouldn't be on medication are getting lots of medication easily. And
why is this happening?
And what's so disturbing to me is that the vast majority of that overprescribing is being done by people who are not trained to, frankly, prescribe those medicines. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 35 years, maybe 30 years. I always have to do the math. Decades in a psychiatric hospital. And I was always kind of interested I was sort of a neuroscience guy in college. I was always interested in psychiatry. Didn't want to do it, but I was interested in it. Ended up moonlighting a psychiatric hospital because I was interested, and then I took over their medical services. And I got, lots and lots and lots of psychiatry and lots of interaction with psychiatry. And I thought I understood psychiatry and knew kind of how to do psychiatry. And the first thing I realized is I do not. I do not. There's a reason people are trained in psychiatry. I'm an internist. I need my psychiatric colleagues. It gets very complicated very quickly. And I try always, if I'm going to prescribe a psychotropic medication, to get a psychiatric consult. The problem is insurances won't pay for it. Patients don't want to see a psychiatrist. I'm not crazy, this kind of stuff. But trust me, you get right patient, right treatment, better outcomes. And now these, 30 or 40% of kids entering college are on psychotropic medications. That's an insane number. And then nobody's doing the hard work of psychotherapy and making meaning out of life and being purposeful and all these things that look, there's a famous story. This is a good way to put a button on this. I don't know if it's apocryphal or otherwise, but it's been repeated to me a number of times that when Sigmund Freud came to this country, people don't realize that psychoanalysis had a grip on this country, on the psychiatric, our psychiatric colleagues, psychiatric medicine for like 50 years. And it did untold harm, frankly, not because psychoanalysis is such a problem, but the assholes the blowhards that became psychoanalysts think they knew everything on how to save the world, and they did bad things in the government. Another story, we can get into that if you want. But when Freud got here, early part of the 20th century. Apparently, allegedly, some reporters came up and said, "Dr. Freud, what do you hope to do with your time here in the United States?" And he said, "Well, Val, ultimately, I want to be able to determine the difference between true psychiatric illness and ordinary misery." Ordinary misery is good. How do we treat most psychiatric illness today? Exposure. Exposure therapy has been shown to be one of the most significant advances in psychiatric care. Not a safe space, not avoiding things you find unpleasant. Exposure to things. That's how you develop resiliency and strength and regulatory capacities in the face of difficulties. Exposure. Ordinary misery is good. You work it through. And exposure is how you build mental health. We have done the freaking opposite for the last 30 years. We've created a population that is not healthy mentally. I'm sorry. And at very minimum, you should be worrying about meaning making and contributing more than we do, not getting or experiencing. We should be making meaning. That's of our lives. That's the most important. Humans are meaning making machines.
Yeah. That goes back to, I hate to sound trite about it, but you can read the Stoics.
Of course.
Of course. And they will say the same thing.
I try to pick up.
The obstacle is the way.
Obstacle is the way. Go Ryan Holiday, for those of you that know that he's a friend of mine.
Look at us name dropping.
Well, I invented Ryan Holiday. I'm taking.
You invented him?
Yes. I was doing a little symposium 20 years ago, and it was a bunch of college newspaper people. And this one kid came up to me and he goes, "What are you reading right now?" And I go, "Look, man, I read a lot and I read weird. I read weird stuff. I would not build your reading recommendations based on what I'm reading right now." He goes, "What are you reading?" I go, "Well, I'm reading this thing called the Enchiridion by this guy named Epictetus. He's a famous Stoic philosopher." And he goes, "Oh, really? I'm going to read it." And I go, "Okay, it's not light lifting. Prepare yourself." And we talked about it a little bit, and that launched him into his Stoic career.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
That's really cool. I only met him after he wrote "The Obstacle is the Way." I was quoting it on what was then Twitter constantly because it just was so astonishingly simple and real, and it just made so much sense to me. It was like so clarifying.
Everybody go pick it up. The Obstacle is the Way. And read a little Marcus Aurelius too, which is I believe Ryan's favorite Stoic. He's
mine.
And Stoicism,
I do like Seneca too.
Yeah, Stoicism gets criticized for not being a philosophical system, which technically is not. But what more should philosophy be but how to lead a good life? And that is what Stoicism is about.
Yes. So yes, we both support and recommend Ryan Holiday. Yeah. There's a trilogy of them, but start with "The Obstacle is the Way" and go from there. The idea being what you just said: expose yourself to the pain, to the discomfort, to even some of the misery. God knows I've had my share. I don't get into it, but you know what?
Likewise.
It's made me strong.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for every kid in this country, is not to be protected and coddled, but to be strong and resilient and productive and have agency and understand their agency. And, it's just not promoted enough in school or in a lot of places. Sports, I think it still is.
A bit.
But until we start letting males bash on females. Okay. Back on my soap opera. I could talk to you for hours, and I hope we can do it again, because I would love to get into some of the historical stuff with you too.
I'm into it.
He is Dr. Drew Pinsky. There are many, many channels we've been flashing up, and in the show notes, you can see where to follow him, where to find him, where to view him, where to watch him, where to listen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, Michelle. Hope to see you again in person.
Yep. And as I always say at the end of each podcast, be brave, do good, and expose yourself to a little misery. Have a good one.